The judge's voice cracked like a rifle shot across that courtroom. Take it off. 3 words and 40 years of service meant nothing to him. I stood there in my dress uniform, my navy cross catching the fluorescent light, and I felt every eye in that room land on my chest like a verdict already decided. My sister-in-law was smiling. She thought she'd already won. She had no idea what was sitting inside my briefcase. My name is Marcus Brooks. I'm 64. I've spent 18 years wearing this uniform. I've bled for it, buried friends who wore the same one. And on a gray Tuesday morning in a county courthouse that smelled like burnt coffee and old carpet, I found myself standing trial. Not for anything I'd done wrong, but because a woman I'd once called family decided my honor was something she could put a price tag on. I joined the army at 22. Back when my father joked I had more stubbornness than sense. He wasn't wrong. I served 2 decades overseas, wounded once badly enough that I spent 4 months relearning how to walk without wincing. Somewhere in the middle of it, during a joint operation I still think about at 3 in the morning, I earned the Navy Cross. It's not a medal you talk about, it's one you carry quietly, because the people who understand what it costs don't need you to explain it, and the people who don't never will. I never wore it to family dinners. I said I'm in the army and left it there. My sister-in-law Melissa was cut from different cloth. She married my brother David 12 years ago, and from the first Thanksgiving, I could feel her sizing up our family like a woman doing inventory. The china cabinet, my mother's ring, the deed to the old house when my parents passed. My father first, my mother 18 months later. They left the family house to David and me equally. White clapboard, a wraparound porch, an oak tree my father planted the year I was born. It wasn't about the money. It was the last piece of them we had left. Melissa saw square footage. She pushed David to sell, split the cash, use it for the kids, use it for the business, use it for anything except letting it sit there holding memories. I refused. Months went by. Calls got shorter. Holidays got tense. And then one spring afternoon, I got served papers at my own front door. Melissa was suing me. Misappropriation of shared property. Fancy words for she wanted to force a sale. And when I wouldn't budge, she decided the courtroom would get her what I wouldn't. I walked into that courtroom in my dress uniform, not for show, but because I'd come straight from a veterans memorial service and hadn't had time to change. I sat at the defendant's table, straightened my jacket, and glanced once at Melissa, already whispering to her lawyer with a smile stretched too wide. Judge Richard Harlan banged his gavel, glanced at the paperwork, glanced at me, and something in his face shifted, sharp, almost offended. He leaned forward and said the words that would end up changing everything. "This is not a place to show off war trophies." "I'm sorry, Your Honor," I said, keeping my voice level. "This uniform isn't a costume. I came from a memorial service this morning." He didn't look up. Take off the medal. The room went quiet the way a room does when everyone realizes they're watching something they shouldn't be. My attorney Foster started to rise, mouth already forming an objection. I put a hand on his arm and shook my head. "Not yet." "Is that an official order of this court?" I asked. Harlan's eyes flicked to mine, irritation of a man unused to being questioned. "Yes," he said. "It is." Beside me, Melissa exhaled a soft, satisfied breath. She thought a man in a robe telling me to strip a piece of my identity off my chest was going to break something in me. She had no idea who she was dealing with. I reached down, unclasped my briefcase, and set it on the table with a click that seemed to echo louder than it should have. Melissa's smile faltered. "Permission to approach, Your Honor," I said, and when he nodded impatiently, I walked the folder up myself instead of routing it through the clerk. I wanted him to have to open it, to have to touch it. The first page was the formal citation confirming the Navy Cross, signed off by officers whose names carried weight in rooms far more serious than this one. The second was a Department of Defense verification record, case number, verification stamp, chain of signatures. The third was a formal legal opinion from the Office of the General Counsel spelling out the protections surrounding the wearing of duly awarded military decorations during official proceedings, not a courtesy, policy backed by federal guidance.
This changes nothing, Harlan said, but his voice had lost its certainty. I asked him to read the final page. He hesitated, then turned it. A memorandum distributed to federal and state courts alike, laying out plainly that any request to remove a properly worn decoration had to be grounded in clear legal necessity, not personal discretion.
There was no ambiguity in it, no room for a judge to claim he simply hadn't known better. "Where did you get this?" he asked, and for the first time his voice carried something closer to concern than command. "I've had legal counsel for some time, Your Honor," I said. "I anticipated this might become more complicated than a property dispute." Foster cleared his throat beside me. "Your Honor, given the sensitivity of this matter, I'd like the court's remarks from this morning preserved verbatim in the transcript." The clerk spoke up from her desk. "For the record, today's proceedings are being recorded as per standard policy." Harlan hadn't forgotten that fact. He'd simply, in the rush of his own irritation, not thought through what it meant. Every dismissive comment about war trophies, every clipped demand that I strip a medal off my chest, captured, preserved, time-stamped, available to anyone whose job it was to review exactly this kind of conduct. I watched something shift behind his eyes. Not panic exactly, but the dawning awareness that he'd walked into a moment he couldn't talk his way back out of. "Your Honor," I said, keeping my tone measured, "I understand the court has discretion in how it manages proceedings. I've never questioned that. I only wanted the record to reflect the nature of what was asked of me." Harlan set the folder down slowly and looked at Melissa's lawyer, then at Melissa herself, who had gone very still, her hands folded into fists in her lap. She had expected me to fold, to get flustered, to hand her a scene she could paint as instability in front of a judge already inclined to see me that way. She hadn't expected the ground to shift under the judge. Instead, he cleared his throat and addressed the room in a voice that had lost every trace of its earlier command. "The court withdraws its earlier remark," he said, "and it will proceed on the merits of the property claim alone." It took him 4 sentences to gut Melissa's entire case without the theater she'd been counting on, without a decorated veteran rattled into looking unstable on record. All that remained was a woman suing her brother-in-law over a house neither of my parents would have wanted sold. Her lawyer asked for a recess. Harlan granted it, and by the time the afternoon session opened, Melissa's attorney withdrew the suit entirely, citing insufficient grounds. Outside on the courthouse steps, David was waiting, the way he should have been from the beginning. He didn't say much. He just put a hand on my shoulder and said he was sorry it ever got this far. I told him the truth. I wasn't angry at him. I was just done letting anyone decide my patience was a weakness to exploit. I still own that house. I fixed the porch last spring, and this summer, David's kids spent 2 weeks there the way we used to, catching fireflies under the oak tree my father planted the year I was born. I don't wear the Navy Cross often, still don't need the applause, but I keep that blue folder in the same briefcase, corners worn soft, because some rooms only respect what you can prove, and I'd rather walk in prepared than walk in hoping to be believed.